a time-ravaged landmark.
We have come to realize that it's worse than what anybody expected.
An unparalleled architectural challenge.
You look at the church, you know it was built 85 years ago, and the workmanship that it went into it to build it. Now we tore it apart, put it back together.
The story of a great monument of faith, the people who built it, and the people who restored its luster. A crowning achievement, the restoration of the Cathedral of Saint Paul. Next.
Production of this program is made possible in part by Anderson Corporation, celebrating a century. Long live the home. Miller Dunwoody Architects, shaping and preserving the environment through responsible creative design. Premier Banks, Minnesota-owned, Minnesota-operated. McQuillan Brothers Plumbing and Heating Company.
It's the product of a different time, the early years of the 20th century, when communities dreamed big dreams and built big, hefty buildings that exuded confidence.
When Mark Twain first came to St. Paul, he observed that St. Paul was a city made out of brick and stone with an air of intending to stay. And that's very much what the cathedral represents as well. It's that stability, that permanence, that air of intending to stay.
It's a monument of faith, a prayer. It instills wonder.
When I take in a tour group, particularly people who have never been in there before, aren't very familiar with the building, and you can just sort of hear the breath go out of them. It's like, wow.
It's a work of art.
In terms of natural beauty, it's a wow. It's a definite wow.
Its history writ in stone and steel, copper and wood. It's the work of craftsmen who made do with the tools they had.
It's very, very humbling to say, gee, look what these guys did. They were able to accomplish this, and they didn't have the equipment that we have.
I'm one of those folks who sits in this building and I look at the craftsmanship and I wonder, how in those times did you do this? How did you make that happen?
But even the most carefully crafted buildings, the most monumental monuments, get old. They wrinkle and crack. They go gray. As time passes, they beg for renewal. In this respect, the Cathedral of Saint Paul is no different from any other old building, except in this case, it sometimes seems as though the whole world is watching. It took 8.5 years, from the fall of 1906 to the spring of 1915, to complete the Cathedral of Saint Paul, or at least complete it enough to make it a suitable place for worship. The construction of the cathedral was, in the words of one of the original contractors, an enormous undertaking fraught with many dangers. Now, as the old building approaches its second century, a new enormous undertaking is underway. The copper dome is failing.
There's been a lot of patchwork over the years. You can see black spots all over the place where they've patched.
The granite is grimy and discolored. The mortar is crumbling. The plumbing and electrical systems are full of unwelcome surprises.
Lead people, any other items, thoughts others need to be aware of?
The restoration of the Cathedral of Saint Paul will be a 2-year project. Over 50 companies representing 18 major trades will take part. More than 200 workers will brave the elements, squeeze into tight spaces, and scale imposing heights just to get the job done.
All the fellas in the shop are anxious to work on something like this.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to work on it.
Yeah, if I'll get a hold of Darren, he'll set it up on the forklift for you. How's that?
When you get into a project of this size, and when you have as many trades involved as we do in this project, and the cleaning of the stone, and the new roof, and the plumbing, and the heating, and the air conditioning, the electrical, and the lighting, now's the time to do it. Everything is kind of in disarray as it is. Let's do it now for the next 100 years.
You look at the church, you know it was built 85 years ago, and the workmanship that it went into it to build it. Now we tore it apart, put it back together.
Right now we're working right at the base of the candle where the cross sits. The red piece of plywood is just to follow the process through from when it gets here to when it's applied to the dome.
They sawed wood and curved when they built ancient Rome. Kerfing is back cutting a piece of board or plywood is what you've seen us doing. And what it does is it allows us to bend the board into the shape we need to put it in.
The back plate is 1 foot wide. So center of plywood to edge of plywood is 6 inches. Our next one butts up against that. Then they have an exact 1 foot from center to center all the way around the dome. All we're waiting on is 11 o'clock fly time, and then once we get that, everything will go up to Lonnie. Lonnie will take it from there.
Right now we're at about 270 feet. We're at the base of the candle going up to the cross right now.
Since there wasn't any wood up there to begin with, we had to figure out some way of putting the wood in to meet the copper and without changing the design of the copper.
Now we're putting wood behind all the bends, and so everything's got a backer behind it.
Just being able to come up with some of the ideas and just make them work.
If you didn't come here with an open mind every day, you would go home because it would beat you.
85 years ago, they did things a whole lot different than we do today.
My great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren will look at it and say, my grandfather worked on that.
Everything works together. You have to work together on a project like this to make it work. I like working here. It's a big challenge for anyone to have some work on something that you're actually rebuilding, part of history. So it's really fun.
My name is Eric Johnson. I'm with the bricklayers.
Mark Brown, superintendent on the project.
My name is Mike Weisington. I work for John A. Dawson.
I'm Roger Anderson, carpenter foreman here.
My name is Mark Johnson. I'm a carpenter.
Today we have huge cranes and all kinds of power lifts, and we have to remember back in 1912 that was not the situation when the dome and the roof were being put on. Everything was hoisted by hand.
I have not gone anywhere near the top, so this is it. I really haven't gone any higher than this.
The challenge to this job is all about access.
We're up here 14 hours a day or whatever, and when we put the cranes up, we decided to make things a little easier for us.
Okay,
so
Bob, you need
we got a
3-inch screw, 15 dope.
refrigerator and a microwave here in our boxes that we built and got it so we can bring our pop, and got a little lunch, a little banquet chicken meal today.
These cranes are called luffing cranes.
When you're boomed all the way up, it's 350 feet.
Tower crane setup, but with a boom attached to it.
You can't put a poured foundation next to a basement without getting rid of the reactions at the bottom of the crane. So they ended up putting caissons down, which is a poured concrete pier.
Into this base, which is all rebar to tie everything together to anchor the crane in position.
And they went down like 40, 50 feet.
Between the crane operator and the rigger, that's how you get your picks from point A to point B.
They're usually on two-way radio control to you.
I got a mic right in my hand. I could talk to my crane operator any given second. Most loads are either like plywood, copper, different types of scaffolding.
Man baskets are mostly used for an area that you can't reach in any other direction safely.
Flying around in the man basket would be comparable to flying in a hot air balloon.
I like being at the controls instead of riding in the basket. Like I said, I'm okay with heights to a certain point, but I'm not a fair rider.
To get this material up here is the reason why we need these cranes. Otherwise, we'd be pulling this stuff up with ropes.
Oh, well, you'd have to know John Ireland. he was a man for big things.
Roman Catholic Archbishop John Ireland of Saint Paul made things happen. He seemed to will them into being. In the spring of 1904, Ireland threw his energy behind a new project, the biggest of his long life: the construction of a new cathedral. St. Paul's first three cathedrals had been modest structures: a log chapel, a brick house, and finally, a barn-like box of stone at the corner of St. Peter and 6th. All three buildings could claim to be cathedrals because they were, at one time or another, home to the bishop's chair, or cathedra. But none of them was big enough to hold St. Paul's burgeoning Catholic population, or, for that matter, John Ireland's dreams. Ireland's ambitions for his Minnesota flock were typically grand. He wanted to build a new cathedral, a great cathedral, and he knew exactly where he wanted to build it.
The one thing the man obviously knew was a good building site when he saw it. The brow of St. Anthony Hill, as it's sometimes called, is not only the best building site in St. Paul in terms of its visibility from all around the city, it's the single most dramatic building site in the Twin Cities, without a doubt.
This cathedral is set on the highest hill in St. Paul, higher, by the way, than the capital of St. Paul. And I always tell people, it reminds us who's really in charge.
With the help of two prominent St. Paul businessmen, H.F. Smith and H.C. McNair, the Archdiocese bought an elaborate but run-down Victorian home called the Kitson Mansion on St. Anthony Hill. It was 1904, and Ireland had secured his building site. Now he just needed a building.
I can't imagine what it was like building that cathedral at the turn of this century. I can't imagine the visionary mind of an Archbishop of Ireland who undertook such a thing.
In the days that the cathedral was built, it was required that all altars would have a cover over them in order to bring forth the idea in the Old Testament of like the Ark of the Covenant. So the idea of the baldachin is to indicate where the altar is, which is the Holy of Holies within the church building. The donors were the Hill daughters. Another interesting design feature of the baldachin is the two angels up on the top. Two of James J. and Mary Hill's granddaughters sat in pose for those two angels.
I'm Brock Kicker with McGough Construction, the on-site safety coordinator.
Chris Cuiada, carpenter.
My name is Ruben Gomez, and I'm a journeyman.
My name is Tony Hess. I'm a labor foreman for McGough Construction.
Back in those days, everything was wood. There wasn't such a thing as steel scaffolding. None of the methods that we have Everything was so different. You try to imagine what was it like. It's easy to see why it took from 1906 to 1915 to build it, that's for sure.
This type of scaffold is called system scaffold. We needed good, safe working access to all of the dome.
Yeah, I've been all the way up to the top and all the way around on the dome. The scaffold's real secure.
It can be designed to match any structure, any shape. There are really three basic components. The leg, the vertical component, the horizontal component, which provides area to put your platform on, and diagonal bracing, which is illustrated there. The wedges themselves fit on the piece and won't come out. The stability of this system really comes from the connection of the end of the horizontal into the vertical leg. As the wedge is driven tight, this face gets driven against the vertical post, providing that lateral stability. Get a hammer.
The stairwells and the stair system that's built into it makes it much easier to climb as opposed to regular scaffold.
Usually stairwells with typical scaffold go about 100 feet. This type of scaffold, we've got it up there 140 feet on the upper part. It really is Tinker Toys for grown-ups. And there is no other job like this. There is no other building like this in the Twin Cities. There isn't. I tell people, I said, I have the best job for a carpenter right now. I do. Getting up on such a historic building and actually being a part of the building, measuring it and crawling around it, it was a blast.
I'm Andy Rasmussen with McGough Construction. I'm the on-site project manager.
Jay Melton, tinner.
My name is Colleen Anderson.
My name is Louis Perlichek, and I'm a tinner for Dawson Sheet Metal.
Craig Cook, I'm a carpenter, working the saw shack.
It makes us feel pretty great that this roof has lasted 86 years. And the workmanship was tremendous, and there were 40 men that worked 2 years and worked very hard.
I'm Catholic, and I've had 2 sons confirmed in the cathedral, and it is a very special place for me and my family. And for that reason, being able to work here makes it all the more special to me.
I get here a little bit before 6:30. We start work at 6:30.
I like sheet metal because it's a lot of working with your hands and using your brain.
A lot of these ornate pieces, what we call them, they're all the pretty stuff. A lot of them are busted up, a lot of them are real good, and we need to copy them.
This one needs quite a bit of work. We're having to replace some of the decorative items on the side, and that's what I've been working on the last couple of days.
It's fun to work with everything and be versatile, but I'd prefer to work with copper.
Most of my days are spent doing a lot of soldering in here, and then if we get measurements for panels for the dome, then I help make the panels.
We took a part that we're trying to replace and we put a hardened material inside of it so that we can actually use this as a form and take flat sheets of copper and form them over this part to get a finished product.
This is a flame, and this is a decorative piece that'll go back up on the cathedral. One flame takes about 15 to 20 minutes, depending if there's any extra holes where they made mistakes in drilling.
We're going to put foam inside these once they're up there, and that will give them a lot of rigidity.
Or before you could flex this copper by pushing on it, now it's just totally rigid.
Soldering is something I really enjoy. It's very challenging, especially on this older copper. It's hard to make the solder stick to it. Getting it really clean with the wire wheel on the drill, and then using flux, lots of flux.
100 years from now, somebody else will probably be up here looking at this, but hopefully they won't see the kind of damage that we saw.
I like this job because it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. You'll never see nothing like this happen again in your life, probably.
The people that are on this job, they'll have a definite appreciation for using their hands to do quality craftsmanship. And we hope they never lose that.
I think taking your time and making sure everything's done right on this job is very important.
Everything I do here, I want it to be a quality job. And if it isn't right, I'm going to go back and make it right.
I think down the road when somebody comes back to look at this project, they'll think, wow, them guys did a great job.
It's fun. The day goes by before I know it.
You can say that it's not the most beautifully proportioned building in the world. You can look at some of the ornament and say, you know, I've seen really better ornament on the state capitol, for example. But this is a building that just kind of sheds criticism because it's such an important building. And I call it the indispensable building, that the criticism doesn't really matter. It's just, so what? You know, I mean, you can criticize me, but I'm here, look at me.
John Ireland knew almost from the beginning who he wanted to design his new cathedral. French architect Emmanuel Masqueret was best known for his work at the 1904 Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis. Ireland had met Masqueret there and had come away impressed. In 1905, at the Archbishop's urging, a committee of church leaders hired Masqueret to be the new cathedral's architect. The Frenchman moved to Saint Paul and immediately set to work on his design. Masqueret's design was classical Renaissance, with a twist. The cathedral would lay out in the form of a cross, but its transepts, the arms of the cross, would be wider than those typically found in Renaissance architecture. The nave, the cross's body, would be shorter. Above the point where the nave and the transepts met would rise a magnificent dome, 175 feet tall on the inside.
And he came on with a different perspective from a European looking at Minnesota's culture and American society. And I think he did a really good job of interpreting the history and tradition of the best cathedrals of Europe to bring them here, but yet to have a unique American flavor and a unique St. Paul feel.
Ireland and the Cathedral Committee approved Masqueret's vision, and construction began in the fall of 1906. The blueprints were, to put it mildly, open to interpretation.
When this was built, you know, complete plans were never drawn. That was typical in those days. The architect would more or less draw a sketch of what it was he wanted, and then it was up to the contractor to kind of put things together.
Over the years, various contractors and subcontractors served as interpreters of Masqueret's grand design and as stewards of his realized vision. And while some prominently attached their names to the cathedral project, most were content to work behind the scenes.
I was in the wings. I was unseen. The only time that anybody knew we were up there was when we made some pounding noise and the priest would send one of the altar boys up there to tell us to shut up.
The magnitude of this building is just unbelievable. They have some pumps or some fans over there. Those things used to be driven by steam. They have steam pistons in them.
Just to understand how the systems were put in back 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago is quite unique and quite phenomenal. The heating, air conditioning, ventilation, fire protection, lighting, electrical systems, electrical distribution. We do the design of these types of systems.
We had structural engineers, we had architects, we had laborers, carpenters. Everybody had to work together to get this stuff in and hung safely.
We need to crawl under and up and through places that people have never dreamed about or even know that they were there.
The amount of pipe in the cathedral is 4,300 feet of pipe. So it's darn near a mile of pipe just to get the water away from the building. We're draining about 36,000 square feet of roof area throughout the building.
We found drains that were partially or majorly plugged. We found drains with cracks in them.
Without the cranes, without the help of McGough and the laborers, the plumbers would have been in tough shape. My family has been in this business for a long time. We've done a ton of work down at the cathedral. I actually ran some of this stuff.
I'm not sure I'd do a thing different. I would just jump at the chance if it ever came along again to be a part of it. It truly is a unique and beautiful facility.
I mean, this is a piece of history. This needs to be preserved. And to be part of any of it in any way, shape, or form just makes me proud as a peacock.
It's remarkable the difference in the area that's been cleaned and the area that hasn't been cleaned yet. I think there's all of a sudden people beginning to realize that the cathedral is granite.
Granite for the St. Paul Cathedral was quarried out of this quarry.
10 miles outside St. Cloud, a huge hole in the ground survives as a lasting reminder of the cathedral's origins. It was here, at the Rockville Quarry of Clark and McCormick, that workers extracted tons upon tons of sparkly gray-pink granite for the new Cathedral of Saint Paul. 250,000 cubic feet of it.
250,000 cubic feet would be more than 1,000 blocks of this size.
It was a huge job, done with turn-of-the-century tools and machines.
I mean, we got loaders that can pick up 50,000 pounds and carry it around with ease. Back then, you know, that was probably a month's worth of job, get something like that up on the rail car.
Each block was cut to order, numbered, and carried by rail to St. Paul. There, stone workers put each piece in its proper place and gave shape to Masquerad's vision.
If anybody has any concern or would like some evidence about how durable a material granite is, the cathedral is a perfect example of that.
St. Cloud granite was the natural choice. It came from Minnesota. Its high quartz content made it sparkle in the sunlight. And, just as important, the price was right. The St. Cloud stone did have one drawback, however. It was hard, very hard.
St. Cloud granite's a very hard stone. It's not an easy stone to carve, and that's one of the reasons why the cathedral's surfaces, for the most part, are fairly bereft of sculpture.
The most obvious exception to the no sculpture rule was the building's main facade. There, blocks of unfinished granite were set in place to be transformed later into three-dimensional art. It took a team of carvers, armed only with mallets and chisels, nearly 4 years to turn the massive St. Cloud stone into a masterpiece of classical sculpture.
This is the east side, or what we would call the main facade of the Cathedral of Saint Paul. You can see from this the symmetry of the Beaux-Arts style used in the design of the building. The paired columns, the center-placed dome, and also the two transepts which are on each side of the building. Also within the Beaux-Arts style are elements of the Baroque, which include the caps on the bell towers, as well as the very heavy or three-dimensional sculpture, which occurs both over the door and at the roofline.
I feel like I'm a sculptor, kind of. because what I do is when I'm cleaning it, I'm bringing the beauty of the stone out.
What is really neat about microblasting is it works as a big industrial scrub brush.
I'm a microblaster. I'm working with a Vortec microblaster unit right here.
It's a little bit amazing to me that these little round glass beads can beat that dirt off that stone and make it look fresh and new again.
This is the dead man. It mixes the air, the water, and the material of glass beads.
Glass is inert and it's only mixed with water. If somebody wants to have a great sand beach, they could take it home and add it to their lakeshore. But it's a very benign product and so very easily dealt with.
You'll see some stones are pink, some stones have a brown tint, some of them kind of a greenish yellow, and it's very interesting in that way because it brings all that color back.
To put on these virtual sauna suits, to do this job in this kind of weather.
I wear a swimming suit and I wear a T-top, and then we put on a rain bibs and top to keep all the material off of us.
Any warm weather, you're perspiring very heavily. You wet your head down, you wet yourself down sometimes to cool down for a little bit.
Feels like heaven.
You've got a building where the stone looks as good as it does when it comes out of the quarry. It's a comparison of night and day.
The rose windows were designed by probably the most preeminent stained glass artist of the 20th century by the name of Charles Connick. Charles Connick was on a pursuit for as many natural colors as possible. In fact, one of his really great quests was to find what he called true blue, which is where that phrase comes from that we use today. And it's actually the blue that is here in these windows. And if you had the time to sit here all day, you could watch how the light changed. Not just how it changed the shading, but actually the color. It's a phenomenal example of what stained glass is really to do to bring incredible beauty into the building. Actually, there are 3 rose windows here in the cathedral. The one behind me is the resurrection window. The other 2, one is dedicated to the Beatitudes and one to the North American martyrs.
Worshippers filled every available seat during the cathedral's first service on Palm Sunday, 1915. Most couldn't help but look upward. In the far height of the dome, the St. Paul Dispatch marveled, infinity seems to brood.
The height, the build of it, you could tell that it was going to be a beautiful, beautiful place.
But it wasn't beautiful yet. The cathedral's interior was bare, its walls whitewashed brick.
There was no marble, there were no stained glass windows. There was like one light bulb hanging from the dome that provided the light, and the altar and the bronze grills and things that you see just were not here. So it's a pretty stark looking building.
During the following decades, the cathedral's interior assumed a beauty and majesty befitting its impressive exterior. With each new addition, it solidified its reputation as a work in progress.
In that sense, the church has taken a long, long time to complete, and that's typical of cathedrals because they're big buildings, they have very complicated programs, and they inspire a lot of artistry, and that takes time and money to do.
There are 4 main chapels, which are located at the inside corners between the transepts or arms that radiate out from the dome. Inside, adjacent to these chapels, are the 4 main piers or pillars that support the dome. Each of these pillars on the inside have statues of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Not only are these the 4 pillars that support the dome of the cathedral, but they're also the 4 pillars that support the Catholic Church.
My name's Craig Lewis. I'm a carpenter.
I'm Bill, forklift operator.
My name's David Carr. I work with the sheet metal.
Roger Carpenter, tinner.
I'm Louis Candler. I'm a carpenter.
My name is Jay Winan. I'm a stonemason.
In the 20s is when they put the first electricity in, and then they changed over to electric motors at that point. But there's still the old steam engines sitting down here because they were too heavy to take out. We're at where the power comes into the building. This is where it all starts.
The new service to the building is a 2,000 amp, 480 volt service.
So we've got enough power here to run a city block.
We're right above the cathedral plaster. When you're looking up from the cathedral floor up, that's where we are.
Many of the walls are 6 feet thick, and we try to conceal the conduit and wiring, and it's not always easy with a structure of this sort.
Our foreman did an excellent job in finding those routes that would be hidden from everyone and yet give the final product that everybody wants to see.
This is just a short ways up on this one. The other one was an 80-foot tall run all the way to the top. We had to go with that.
There's 3 power wires and 1 neutral and 1 to ground. About 160 feet up.
It's a long walk up. Nice job, Bill.
The power runs that we just pulled in are going to be used for the lighting on the exterior, lighting interior.
I was just noticing they really built this thing to last, though, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did.
I'm absolutely thrilled for my father because it was his dream to start this company. He's the one who went to grade school here. He's the one who probably had the nuns ushering him into this church from the very beginning. And so for his name to now be associated with the cathedral it's just a thrill. You might have to kick that last one into just a hair.
My name is Richard Kubeska. I'm carpenter for McGough.
Paul Kutcher, worked for Danny's Construction doing the support iron for all the scaffolding.
My name's Ryan Donnelly. I'm a sheet metal worker here.
My name's Roger Chaffin. I'm a laborer.
Charlie Irwin's my name. Sheet metal worker. I've been doing this since 1953.
It just fascinates me how these guys did this years ago, you know. They had to know what they were doing when they cut all these stones out because they fit together like a puzzle.
My father was a union bricklayer back in Pennsylvania.
I am a bricklayer. I am doing the grinding and the chipping of the joints and then the repointing of the joints.
Being the son of a bricklayer, I became a bricklayer also.
There's been an estimate that there's close to 42 miles of joints in this entire building. We visited more than one time. First off, we're grinding the joint out. When we do the grinding on the building, we use a variable speed grinder such as this one. It has a 6-inch diamond blade on it. And then from there, we will take an air-powered chipping hammer and take that bit and clean out the joint to approximately 1.5 inches in depth.
I'd like to try and make a little bit of a wedge. Ended up, as you put it in there, it tends to go right to the back of the joint. That way you're building layer upon layer.
This morning I am working on, in the front of the cathedral again, on one of the two main statues over the front doors.
The plastic enclosure that is put up around the chapel contains the heat, helps to keep the cold weather out.
When we're tuck pointing with the mud, there's a little bit of water in this. If the temperature drops below 45 or below freezing, the water in the mortar will freeze and it will ruin the mortar in the wall.
I look at the craftsmanship of this building and it's inspiring. The work is true, it's plumb. Pieces fit together wonderfully. The craftsmanship is outstanding.
I was just telling one of the other guys that I kind of like working inside the shelter because I can't see the rest of the building to see how much is actually left yet.
Designs included often symbolism to help to teach us about the faith. Here in the cathedral, one of the most prominent ones is the small dome above the altar. At the very top of that dome is a painting of a dove, which of course is the symbol of the Holy Spirit. Immediately below that are 7 panels of figures, each of them holding a shield in front of them. And on each of the shields is a symbol of one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Below each of those are 7 stained glass windows, again with figures in them, holding this time round shields, each of the shields having a symbol of one of the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church. And so right there in this little apse dome, we have a mini theology of God's grace.
The best part of this job is seeing how the old tinners did this and seeing how we could do it better to make it last longer than what they did.
Right now you're in the sheet metal shop, temporary shop set up on site, St. Paul Cathedral.
The new roof will have 2 layers of plywood, 2 layers of ice and weather shield, 2 layers of 15-pound felt, a layer of red rosin paper, and then the copper.
It's very rare that we deal with copper. We do maybe 1 or 2 jobs a year, but this is by far the biggest.
The hardest part of this job here is duplicating to the exact. We have many variations of panels here. Some are curved, some are square, some are tapered. Anything we have to do with curves is all by hand. I'd say it's real close to 50% machinery and 50% handwork.
Panels come up from the ground in the shop. We put felt on, we put ice and water shield, felt, red rosin paper. The rosin helps the copper move, expand and contract. Everybody up here is spending time doing each panel individually. You can't mass produce anything. That's all we got right here. Just to make it.
I've worked at the trade of roofing and sheet metal for 58 years, since 1943 during the Second World War.
The crew of guys that are assembled here, the talent that's been involved in all the trades, these guys here are probably the best that I've worked with in the last 20, 25 years.
This is a job, and everybody knows, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
The requirements to work up in this kind of temperature, one needs to dress warm, many layers. It is hard. It's hard on the face and the ears, the fingertips, the tip of the toes. So for break time in the morning, I bring in soup for the guys, and everybody pretty much enjoys what I bring in there. It thaws us all out from the morning cold. That's our coldest part of the day. This is all homemade soups that I make at my place.
When we're busy every day, working 9 hours a day, and it just flies by, and it seems like the week's gone and the weekend's here, and I'm waiting for work come Sunday night. It shouldn't be like that, but it is.
I could have retired long ago, but I don't want to miss this fun. How much fun are we still having? There you go.
This is the back side of the cathedral. The 3 semicircular elements that you see on the back are the Shrine of Nations. There are actually 6 across the back. They're symmetrical. And each of them represents one of the ethnic groups which helped to found the area of Saint Paul. The curvilinear element or semicircle of the shrines makes up part of the Baroque elements of the Beaux-Arts style of the building.
This church was built because you had a dynamic archbishop and a very growing Catholic community and a fast-growing city who wanted to really express the depths of their faith, of their commitment in a certain way.
And very grateful to John Ireland and the people of that time for having had this vision. It was wonderful.
John Ireland called the Cathedral of Saint Paul a supreme act of faith. And it was, in fact, an impressive collaboration of thousands of Minnesotans, Catholic and non-Catholic. It was built with the contributions of children who saved their pennies in special cathedral banks, of wealthy patrons, and of parishioners who gave what they could and signed their names in a leather-bound donor's volume. They gave more than $1.5 million to build the cathedral and make it ready for worship. But many others contributed in different ways. They laid stone, fitted copper, and sketched their names in dark, hard-to-reach places. They, too, walked away from the cathedral with a sense of ownership.
Yesterday, when we were up here digging around, we got a piece of copper up here with a sort of like a punched-in name and date.
We surmised that he was a tinner, and he put his name in here and the city of St. Paul, and dated August 12th, 1914.
His name was Charles Hartman.
I personally never met Charles Hartman, but I've heard from other people he was quite a character and was involved in the original fabrication and installation of the copper.
He took the time and had the pride in his work to put his name inside the cross, or the base of the cross.
Other workers found other ways to immortalize their connection with the cathedral. Joe Davern climbed to the top of the dome and had his photograph taken next to the cross that he helped install.
And when I was a little kid, I was told that my grandfather put that cross on the cathedral. And so I had visions of him carrying the cross on his shoulders, walking up the steps, way up to the top of the cathedral, and placing that cross over the whole city. And the proof of it was, the picture was of him up there, wearing his good hat and smoking his pipe. Well, I think maybe he had a little help. There must have been a few other fellows involved in it, but we never knew about them. We only knew that our grandfather was the man that did that.
Welcome to Freeman's Metal Art, downtown Little Cedar, Iowa. This is the place the cross is being built for the Cathedral of Saint Paul, and this is the team.
It had leaked down through here, and the cedar lumber had worked as a sponge to hold water up against the cross.
It's just more massive than I dreamed it would be. I didn't think it was near that huge. The main channel on the one side was, well, as you can see, is just about rusted completely through.
It must have leaked terribly. The new cross is going to be completely welded. There's practically no way water can get inside the cross. They got to make a jig to hold 14 separate pieces together.
We're thinking this thing is probably having a weight of 1,500 pounds or better.
We are high up in the air now.
I have to warm the aluminum up and watch the temperature. It's real critical so I don't contaminate it or crack it, and then bend it around. It's going to be a total pleasure to put it back together.
What we're looking at is all the pieces of the cross, and what we need to do is convert the three-dimensional shapes of these pieces into 2 dimensions so we can cut them out. And once we get all the pieces put into the scanner, we then have the entire layout for one of the fleur-de-lis. The next step would be to take those pieces and weld them back together in a 3-dimensional shape.
We're at the point of the final assembly of the cross, making sure everything fits, and shine it up, clean it up, and get it ready for shipping.
This cathedral attracts people from all over the world. You'll see people from the East, people from the West, people from Japan, people from Europe.
More than 200,000 people visit the Cathedral of Saint Paul each year.
I headed into town for a couple job interviews, and I was on my way back to my car and thought I'd stop in. It's always good to visit God in the middle of the day.
We had seen the cathedral with the scaffolding around it on the river when we were on a cruise last night.
I saw the cathedral yesterday from the Capitol for all the reconstruction and the renovation, and just had to come. It's beautiful from the outside.
Over the years, thousands of Minnesotans have called it their home parish.
I always feel very comfortable when I'm in there because it was my home.
I feel at home. I'm home when I come in here. I just want to sit down and say, Lord, I'm back again. I'm back again. I'm here where I was for those precious years that meant so much to me.
For countless others, it's a touchstone, a timeless landmark. Without it, the skyline and perhaps even the soul of Minnesota's capital city would be incomplete.
St. Paul has undergone a remarkable renaissance in the last 6 or 8 years. And I think the restoration of our cathedral, to preserve it for the next 100 years, is a very integral part of that revitalization of our capital city.
People are going to look at this building and a relatively small number of other buildings and say, these are the monuments upon which we can build from. These are the defining anchors in our city. We've got to keep these, preserve these, value these, and then we can make change and grow as cities inevitably do, but you got to hang on to some things. And this is obviously, Cathedral is obviously one of the buildings you got to hang on to.
With the reconstruction of the cathedral, it has become much more regal and has brought the community together.
I don't think it gets any better.
It's just been tremendous.
It was the most fun job that I've had in my career.
Now that the process is over, we're very fortunate that no one got hurt.
I'm relieved and I'm happy and I'm enthused and I'm excited and I just want to take a deep breath.
You see all these different emotions on these people's faces. Sometimes it's kind of humbling.
When I drive to work in the morning and I see that sparkle on the building, it's like God sending light to the cathedral.
This is a spectacular work of God on God's church.
It's impossible to even describe what my emotions are today.
It's a lot better on the outside.
My dad worked on taking down the cathedral cross.
This is so historical.
And I feel proud of him, and I think it's a great honor.
Blessed to have been a part of it. Seeing the cross up there today, getting ready to put up, it's just like having another kid. I got 7 of them.
Glad to be here. And I'm one of those 7 kids, so.
No more banquet chicken on this job.
Now it's over, but that's the nature of our business. We need to move on now and go to another project, so that's what we do.
Production of this program is made possible in part by McGough Companies, 5 generations building confidence, and also by the following companies: Capital City Partnership, Meyer, Borgman & Johnson, Roof Spec, St. Patrick's Guild, Weber Electric, Wells Fargo,